Advanced Studio Classroom is on the air. Well, there are dangers of taking drugs during pregnancy. Today we talk about one in particular. Join us. Hello everyone and welcome back to Advanced Studio Classroom. My name is Brandon. Today is March 16th and we are so glad that you have joined us. What have we been talking about the past couple of days, Manya?
We've been talking about fake meat and Amazon.
All right, those two don't really go together, but this is Newsworthy
maybe
Clips.
In the future you can order fake meat
there you
on
go.
Amazon.
She found a way to connect it. And we talked yesterday about the minimum wage increase at Amazon. And the day before we did talk about the cell-based meat, how they're taking animal cells and taking them into a laboratory and well, they're creating meat out of that, and that's pretty incredible. And we don't know what to think about it. There's a big debate about it. Today, we are talking about a study. And what is the drug that we are talking about today, Jack?
So it's acetaminophen, and that's a kind of long chemical name, you might say. But basically, it's a kind of chemical that's popular in a lot of painkillers.
Yeah, if you're familiar with Tylenol, this would fall under that category. And so it is painkillers. People take that all the time for a headache, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Manya's shrugging over there. You can't see that. She doesn't take that, apparently. No, you don't take any painkillers?
Not normally, no. Only if I'm in a lot of pain.
She's never in pain, I guess. Or you just suffer through?
I usually will just suffer, really.
Wow.
It's pretty terrible.
Now, is that a matter of principle? Like, you're like, I don't want to take...
No, I'm just a little bit skeptical because I don't know what's in it. And then a lot of times I can't even read the ingredients. And then it makes me think, like, what is this? What am I putting in my body?
Even for a common painkiller, like Tylenol?
Yeah, I think I've only had Tylenol maybe like 3 times in my life.
Well, I don't take Tylenol very often because I don't normally get headaches. There was a recent period where I had some pain in my head, which is pretty scary because I don't normally get headaches. Actually, sometimes when I get a headache, I think I'm dying because I never get them, really. And I know a lot of people do get them a lot. So I don't take painkillers often, but I do take some other medication, like if I have a cold. When I was in the United States, I took over-the-counter drugs when I would come down with a cold or something like that, and we'll talk about that term later. How about you, Jack? Do you take painkillers, I guess, from time to time?
Yeah, I do, yeah. The way I feel about it is drugs that I think have been around for a good long time. They've been tested for a long time. So a lot of these Tylenol or basically a lot of acetaminophen products, I trust those. I'll take them occasionally if I have a headache or something like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we were talking about women who have taken this particular painkiller while being pregnant and the effects of that, according to a recent study. We are on page 28, so if you have your magazine or your digital device, follow along with us as we have our first reading for today.
Acetaminophen use during pregnancy. In the first study of its kind, researchers from the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai found an elevated rate of language delay in girls at 30 months old born to mothers who use acetaminophen during pregnancy, but not in boys. This is the first study to examine language development in relation to acetaminophen levels in urine. Acetaminophen, also known as paracetamol, is the active ingredient in Tylenol and hundreds of over-the-counter and prescription medicines. It is commonly prescribed during pregnancy to relieve pain and fever.
We are talking about research, and this is the first study of its kind, and we are looking at this Mount Sinai Health System in New York City. We're getting some information from them, and they found an elevated rate of language delay in girls at 30 months old born to mothers who used this painkiller during pregnancy, acetaminophen, but not in boys. Now, this will get confusing at times, so let's try to clear it up before we get there. So, traditionally, or studies show, research shows that boys develop at a slower rate when it comes to language capabilities. That is still true. So this doesn't change that overall trajectory. However, what we are saying here, what the study is saying, that because when women took a certain amount of this painkiller, that it affected girls in a negative way. Okay, and we actually see that it maybe helped boys in a positive way, maybe a little bit, but overall, boys still do not develop as quickly as girls. This has kind of slowed down the rate for some girls. So that's kind of the overall picture here. Well, this is the first study to examine language development in relation to acetaminophen levels in urine, and so this is something new, and that's something to pay attention to, isn't it, Manya? Anytime we read these articles and a study's been done, if it's the first one, well, we probably need to see some other studies as well.
Yes, that probably means there's so much more to explore.
But it's pretty incredible that, hey, there are 754 women who are involved in this. We see that in the sidebar there at the top. I always want to look at that, Jack, to see, do they study 2 people? Well, probably not. But you want to see how many people are involved in the study as well.
Absolutely. You want to know what's the size of the survey, the control group. And 754... it's a decent-sized group. It's not a massive survey, but it's enough to take a notice.
All right, so they are looking at urine samples. We'll talk more about that as well later. But let's look more in the next paragraph about what this painkiller is all about, Jack.
Yes, so acetaminophen, also known as paracetamol, is the active ingredient in Tylenol. Not only Tylenol, though, but hundreds of over-the-counter and prescription medicines.
All right. And so over-the-counter. Now, if I maybe come down with a cold, I go to the local store, maybe a grocery store even, and they'll have a section with some medicine that you can just go to the shelf and pick up and buy. That would be over-the-counter medicine. Now, if I go to the doctor, he will prescribe a medicine, and I need him to do that in order for me to get the medicine. So that's the difference, right? Over-the-counter is much more accessible, and I would do that a lot when I would get a cold, for example. Now, this is something that Manya does not do, right, so much?
Not so much, only when I'm desperate and really sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are a lot of people, I've had friends who are like, I try not to take medication, right? And some people are like that, and others are fine. They'll take medication whenever they are sick. And then, of course, I just explained prescription medicines, and that's a prescription drug would come from a doctor that would prescribe it, and you would have to go to the pharmacy, of course, to get that.
So something to note here is that acetaminophen, just by itself, like Tylenol is basically just acetaminophen.
That's a brand.
Yes, that's right.
With that.
Acetaminophen is an over-the-counter available drug. It's considered safe enough that doctors, you don't need a prescription typically to get it. When it's in a prescription, it's because it's been combined with some kind of stronger chemical. So it's largely considered a pretty safe drug to use.
All right, and we have the word prescription here used as a noun, or prescription medicine used as a noun phrase. And then it is commonly prescribed, used as a verb here, prescribed, during pregnancy to relieve pain and fever, which is common, right? to do that, right? You take a painkiller when you have fever or you have pain.
Yeah, and of course, a doctor can prescribe just an over-the-counter medicine too. He can just tell you to pick up some of this medicine and take it. It can be either prescription or non-prescription.
All right, next we're going to get into more of the details of this study. It's quite interesting to see the outcome. So stay tuned as we go to our second reading, and we'll be back in just a moment to have more discussion.
Acetaminophen was used by 59% of the women in early pregnancy. Acetaminophen use was quantified in two ways: high use versus no use, and women who did not report any use as the comparison group. For the urine analysis, the top quartile of exposure was compared to the lowest quartile. Language delay was seen in 10% of all the children in the study, with greater delays in boys than girls overall. However, girls born to mothers with higher exposure, those who took acetaminophen more than 6 times in early pregnancy, were nearly 6 times more likely to have language delay than girls born to mothers who did not take acetaminophen.
All right, let's dig into more about the details of the study. Now, we have a sidebar at the top that says about the study, and we see this long title, the Swedish Environmental Longitudinal Mother and Child Asthma and Allergy Study. Selma, let's just call it Selma, provided data for the research. Information was gathered from 754 women, which I mentioned previously, who were enrolled into the study in weeks 8 to 13 of their pregnancy. So those are some of the specifics. Now, this drug, acetaminophen, was used by 59% of the women in early pregnancy. Now, how did they measure this, Jack?
So it was quantified, the use was quantified in two ways: high use versus no use, and women who did not report any use as a comparison group.
All right, so quantify just meaning they measured it in these two ways. High use, and I believe high use was those who took acetaminophen more than 6 times since becoming pregnant. They were, if you took more than 6, you're already considered to be in the high use category. So they had the high use category versus no use, and women who did not report any use. Now, women who did not report any use, meaning I guess that they said they didn't take any. I don't know if they maybe couldn't remember. I don't know exactly what that category, but it looks like basically high use versus those who did not use it. Of course, you want to compare the two, right? You need a comparison group in a study to get good results. Otherwise, how would you know what the results are, right?
Exactly. I mean, you can't do a study without a comparison.
Right. Okay, so for the urine analysis, what did they do, Jack?
So the top quartile of exposure was compared to the lowest quartile, and if I understand that correctly, it probably means the lowest quartile of the group that was exposed also.
Yeah, so they're comparing the urine examples. Maybe, they said they took it a lot. They took this painkiller a lot, so they're comparing those urine samples with those who didn't take this painkiller very much. And quartile is, 4 equal measurements. So you have maybe like 4 different categories that those fall into. Now we're getting to the point. Language delay is what we're looking at. Language delay was seen in 10% of all the children in the study. Okay, 10% of all the children in the study had a language delay, with greater delays in boys than girls overall. Now that, again, we tried to clear that up earlier because this is a general fact that boys develop slower in this area. And we also see that the girls were 30 months old, right? They were doing this study to see, and we're talking about language here, so they had to be old enough to actually test that. And they said, I was looking, this study was also covered in Time magazine, and Time magazine, they said children who use fewer than 50 words at this age were considered to have a language delay. So those some of the specifics about how they did the study. So as we move on, it says, however, girls born to mothers with higher exposure, those who took acetaminophen more than 6 times in early pregnancy, were nearly 6 times more likely to have language delay than girls born to mothers who did not take the drug. So the point here is they're really talking about what happened to girls. I mean, they're also talking about what happened to boys, but it really affected girls, Manya, in a negative manner.
Yes, I wish we knew why, but maybe they're still trying to figure that out. But clearly, the girls who were born to mothers who took the drug had experienced something.
Right, and we have, a side note here that we need to address. It's at the end of the article, and it tells us that these results are actually consistent with studies reporting decreased IQ and increased communication problems in children born to mothers who use more acetaminophen during pregnancy. And so this is linked to other studies, Jack, and basically saying that, hey, this drug is really affecting kids in a negative way, right?
Yes, and as we're going to see in just a second, you may wonder why they're testing language development, but it turns out that language development is a good indication of overall mental development later on. And so I'm sure that they've probably looked at other studies and how other drugs have affected child's development, and so they've probably based this study on other studies and gained a lot of insight about how to perform it.
Yeah, and you think of, okay, if you're a mom who's pregnant and you're in pain or you have fever, you want to take something, but you think, well, I don't want to affect my kid, right? And so you read something like this, and all kinds of studies, and you can read a lot and get scared, and we don't want to be fearful about everything, but it is something maybe to take into consideration.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like being pregnant, I'm sure, is already really difficult.
Yeah.
And so when you're in pain, I imagine you just want to relieve it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they are doing a study like this just to let people be aware, but not be scared.
Right. All right. Next, we're going to learn more about this fascinating study. So stay tuned as we have our last reading for today.
Given the prevalence of prenatal acetaminophen use and the importance of language development, our findings, if replicated, suggest that pregnant women should limit their use of this analgesic during pregnancy, said the study's senior author, Shauna Swan, PhD professor of environmental and public health at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. It's important for us to look at language development because it has shown to be predictive of other neurodevelopmental problems in children. Both the number of tablets and concentration in urine were associated with a significant increase in language delay in girls, and a slight but not significant decrease in boys. Overall, the results suggest that acetaminophen use in pregnancy results in a loss of the well-recognized female advantage in language development in early childhood.
All right, and so next we get a quote from the study's senior author, and she says, given the prevalence of prenatal acetaminophen use and the importance of language development, our findings, if replicated, suggest something. So let's back up here. The prevalence of this, meaning that it is used quite often. And then the word prenatal, Manya.
It refers to before birth, during pregnancy.
Right, relating to or occurring during pregnancy. And so, of course, that's what we're talking about. These ladies are pregnant, and they are using this painkiller. Now, this is an important point. We learned that this is the first study of its kind. And so they want to see, Jack, if these results in later studies, if they are replicated or not. That would be an important point.
Yes, absolutely. So replication is being able to recreate, kind of almost make a copy of something. So obviously there's going to be more tests on this, and they want to see if they come up with a copy of the same kind of findings.
If you have similar results, then if you see that several times, then there's a pattern and it looks to be true. Well, they suggest that pregnant women should limit their use of this analgesic during pregnancy. And so, if this continues on, they're saying, hey, limit the use because you don't want to affect your children, especially girls, in a negative way.
Mm-hmm. And analgesic, just briefly, is I learned about this. I didn't know about it. It's a type of painkiller, and basically there are two main kinds of painkiller that either are analgesic or anesthetic. So anesthetics, they dull pain, but they put you to sleep. Analgesics dull pain, but you do not sleep. You stay awake.
Oh, very good distinction there. Good to know. Thank you, Jack. And as we move up to the next column, she goes on to say it's important for us to look at language development because it has shown to be predictive of other neurodevelopmental problems in children. And so we're not just looking at this just for language sake. It could be linked to other issues, Manya.
Yes, it can affect someone's nerves, basically.
All right, neurodevelopmental problems, and it could be predictive of that. It could tell us, hey, if you're having this issue, you may have these other issues as well. Mm-hmm. Well, what about the number of tablets and the concentration in the urine, Jack?
Yes, so both the number of tablets and concentration in urine were associated with a significant increase in language delay in girls and a slight but not significant decrease in boys. So what does this mean? Overall, it suggests that acetaminophen use in pregnancy results in a delay in language development, basically.
Right. For girls, but it could help boys slightly, right? But boys overall still do not develop as fast as girls. According to the Time magazine article, there was no significant difference in language delays between boys whose moms took acetaminophen and those whose moms did not. In fact, women with higher urine concentrations of the drug during pregnancy were slightly less likely to have sons with language delays.
This is obviously anything talking about the brain is so complex, and it's really fascinating to me. And this fact, I've always known this fact too, that girls do develop their language skills faster than boys. And it really makes me think that it must have something to do with the development of the brain while in pregnancy.
Yeah.
It's not after pregnancy probably so much, but it must have something to do about how young girls, once they're in the womb, how their brains develop during that time. It must be very important.
Yeah, and it's incredible that we can know this, right? And that there's so much research. We have so much at our fingertips these days. It can be overwhelming, right? You're like, oh, great, another study that says this, and then another study that might say the opposite. But I think it's good to be informed at least, and not to, again, not that we let this make us fearful, but that we just are informed about what's going on.
Yes, it could be easy to overreact to some of these things. Someone might say, that's it, I'm never using acetaminophen ever again. But really, this study is addressing pregnancy. And, women, when they are pregnant, do have to take a lot of special precautions, not just for drugs, but even for certain foods. And so it is a kind of a special situation. It's not saying that acetaminophen is now a dangerous medicine or something like that, but just to be cautious about how we use it.
Right. And, you know, speaking of overreacting, I don't know if any of you have ever gone onto a website like maybe WebMD or something and you type in your symptoms and you think you're dying. That's the only thing. I was like, oh, you just have to stay away from that. And so you don't, when it comes to medical terms and getting information, it can be scary because maybe you're not familiar with that and you're like, oh no, what is this saying? And I think, of course, they want to tell you maybe the most extreme situation just to make you be cautious, right? And say, hey, check this out in case it's this extreme situation when in fact it maybe is not. But it's good to err on that side, I guess, and, you know, to some degree. But for me, I'd like just to stay away from those sites. Maybe just go see the doctor.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have been talking about various topics over the past 3 days. Our time is wrapping up for newsworthy clips this month. I just want to get some final thoughts from our panelists concerning these 3 topics. You know, what are some thoughts that you have on any of the 3 topics that we have discussed? Kind of an open floor here. Jack, we had talked about fake meat. We talked about Amazon's minimum wage. And today we talked about acetaminophen. Which topic would you like to give a final thought on? Or maybe you want to wrap all 3 in one. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of, I see 2 in particular as related here, fake meat and Amazon. You may say, how are those related? Well, I think they both are a response to a growing population in the world. Where are we going to get our food sources? And inflation in economies and so on. And how are we going to give jobs to many people and care for them? And, you know, these are all great things to talk about in our world today.
I'm still thinking about fake meat. I wonder what it tastes like. I wonder what it looks like. I wonder if it's all the animals. Is it beef? Is it pork? Is it all of them? Or can they like combine all of them and then we get this whole new species of meat?
Oh, beef, pork.
Yeah.
Yeah, like pork. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, you think that. You know, you take different fruit and you put those together and you have this hybrid fruit. Maybe that can happen with meat. That sounds pretty disgusting kind of to me, but hey, who knows? I think if you put the right sauce on it,
it could be
cover up the taste.
The new cronut.
Ooh, cronuts. That's a
donut.
whole nother
Yes.
topic. Don't get me started on that. Well, thank you, panelists, for weighing in and giving us your final thoughts. And we'd like to hear from you, listeners, as well. Maybe you have an opinion about one of these topics. Write into us at advanced@studioclassroom.com and let us know your thoughts. And maybe your feedback will end up on our feedback page in the magazine. Who knows? Write in and let us know your thoughts. And thanks for joining us, everyone. Join us again next time here on Advanced Studio Classroom. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.